I'm so excited. It's the 7-day Reinvent You challenge, and we have my friend James Deere on today. He is the founder of Break the Chain, a nonprofit organization on a world mission to reduce suffering and educate people about mental health related issues. James has made Break the Chain the go-to location for mental health and addiction support through its podcasts, live addiction support sessions, Facebook support group, Instagram inspirations, and online shop, and so much more. I am honored to have James on with us to give us insight in the world of addiction and how to reinvent your life when facing it. Welcome, James.
Hi, Alyssa. Thanks for the introduction. You nailed that one. Yeah, thanks for having me on today.
Yeah, I'm excited. Thank you so much for being on. I am so excited to, our 7-day challenge is really focused around people reinventing their lives. And addiction is a huge factor for so many. And there's so many different ways that addiction can be incorporated in your life, whether it's, various substances, food, different behaviors that we might exhibit outside of, a substance. So I'd love to dive in and hear about your story of addiction and how you reinvented your life, and then kind of go from there.
Absolutely. Addiction is something that creeps into all of our lives.
Yeah.
The thing is, I didn't really know what addiction was, and it was only because mine was so bad that it gave me an awareness for what addiction was, and the awareness that came later. And I'll start with the realization of what addiction was, and then I'll go back and explain what actually happened in my own life. So addiction by definition is anything that we do it and we enjoy it, and then we start to crave it, and then it has negative impacts on our life, and then we still don't stop. And then we keep relapsing. Yeah. So it's only an addiction when it actually has the negative consequences. That's when it actually crosses that threshold. So in my own life, I was addicted to ketamine, which is like an anesthetic. It's on the way towards heroin. There's so many drugs in the world that are like that. Mostly prescribed legally, OxyContin, all these things like diazepam, Valium, anything that they give you for anxiety or sleeping, or all these things, most of them come from actually opiates. So practically, it's actually quite common for people to be going down that route of these depressive type of drugs. And I really liked that escape from the reality, because I couldn't deal with reality itself. So, I never thought I would end up on drugs. As a kid, I was always terrified of drugs. My parents brought me up to believe that if I did drugs, I would probably die. I thought they put the absolute fear of death in me, really. If you do drugs, there's a good chance you're going to die. So I was just like, it wasn't even on the radar for me.
Wow, that's interesting. You had the awareness. Okay, wow.
I wouldn't say I had any awareness, actually. When at that age, I wouldn't say that I had much awareness at that age. I'd say I was very unaware. I was just on the wagon, and I was getting directed by my emotions and desire to be accepted. And there was obviously something missing in my life, and I kind of latched onto a group of friends, because I never felt like I fitted in anywhere. And I latched onto a group of friends that kind of accepted me to whatever degree that a group of lads accepts when they're like 12, 13 years old. It was kind of like, but like mates, but still like very abusive to each other and whatever. But these were my mates, and it was the first place I felt like where I kind of fitted in a bit. And they, as time went on, they all actually started using drugs. And it was kind of like, at that point, it was like, either you got to choose between saying no to something that I had no interest, I really had no interest in, and having no friends, and having no connection to people, and not being approved of by the external world, and it was just there's no chance I was going to say no.
Yeah.
I had to impress my friends. I had to stay a part of that thing at that age, and I ended up. Turns out I really enjoyed you know, like in the short term, I was just like, well, that's great. You know, it felt brilliant. But as time went on, the responsibility of the world started coming. You know, and this is later realizations. Again, I wasn't aware of any of this and how it all happened at the time. I wasn't thinking at all. But over time, I didn't want to face reality at all anymore, and I buried myself deeper and deeper into a hole, trying not to face it, trying not to grow up. But, you know, it was complete Peter Pan. You know, I didn't want to do life. I didn't want to deal with uncomfortable emotions. I didn't want to deal with getting a job and thinking about getting a mortgage. And there was this big gap between me as a kid where I was, and then where I saw my parents were with a business, and then all my family have businesses, like uncles and all these things. And I was just like, that to me was just like some far out thing. And I was just like, the whole real world thing to me just didn't look that appealing. And I just hid from it through that escape. And you know, I ended up on drugs from the moment I woke up. Before I got out of bed, I had to have sniffed a line of ketamine before I got out of bed. It's like a white powder, basically. I had sniffed it before I got out of bed, and then until the moment I went to sleep, all day, every day, for a decade. I did that for, and at the weekend, you know, I'd really push it. I'd be like, it wasn't uncommon for me at the weekend to use ketamine, cocaine, drink loads of alcohol, sometimes Valium and diazepam, LSD, mushrooms, just like everything all at the same time, you know. And I was just completely, that was actually normal in my group of friends, which was, I guess that's not completely normal, but also it's not uncommon for, you know, when you choose not to do reality over time, when drugs get less and less effective, because obviously they start out strong and then you build a tolerance to things quite fast. And, you know, there's no extremes, and I'm super lucky that I never ended up on heroin, because that's just the level beyond where it, you know, that really has, on top of all the psychological, mental grip, it also has the physical grip on you as well, where it makes you physically ill in the same way that alcohol can also do that as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's interesting having been through that and having that awareness of, I mean, obviously I'm, you know, I haven't used drugs for quite a long time now. And to me, the idea of getting out off drugs, like just not being on drugs seemed just like impossible to me. And I had to make a really drastic move towards getting sober. And I actually completely left that environment that I was from and seeking a new beginning. And I realized that, you know, when I got completely away from the drugs, that there was a problem there. And it wasn't the drugs, it was the desire not to face my internal world that I'd been running away from. And we spend a lot of time blaming drugs for addiction, but they're just a symptom of the addiction. And this is what I realized is, because once I wasn't on drugs, it moved on to alcohol. I never really liked that. And then it moved on to food. I've spoke to you a little bit about food before. And I would eat myself practically to death, close to. I would eat sometimes I'd get really bad anxiety, and I would eat like a full pizza and then eat a full packet of cookies on top of it. And I'd just be sat there like just feeling completely empty inside. My stomach was so full, to the point of like nearly exploding, and then I had to make myself sick to sleep and stuff like that. And it was just like, it wasn't, you know, blaming drugs for an addiction is not a good idea, because it takes the power away from you, and it completely takes the focus of the product. It's not the right place to be looking.
You know what you first brought awareness to me was in the beginning when you spoke about your parents having like instilled that belief that drugs are dangerous. You don't want to do them, you're going to die. But it wasn't that you were educated and informed. You were just, that was just kind of put in front of you, but it wasn't enough to really be fully educated on it. And then you were exposed in an environment where you wanted to be accepted, and that was overpowering even that thought process and the belief that you were raised with. So that was pretty powerful in itself. And just, I mean, the cocktail that you began to consume because the high wasn't there anymore on the weekends, it just all speaks to how the addictive patterns and how you said when you stopped and you removed yourself from the environment and you stopped the drugs, you then begin to try other things, whether it be food and alcohol or whatever it may be. And it never fixed the problem because the root was your own emotional state and your own demons within that you had to look at versus a substance that you were tending to go to.
My life didn't have a low in the physical sense, in the sense that like it wasn't just the weekends, it was 7 days a week, and you know, like it was constant, and there wasn't a low. I was basically on a constant drip of drugs, a chemical drip basically at all times, just to try and maintain this state of euphoria, of sensual stimulation.
And for you, do you think why didn't you feel that you needed to go to maybe a facility like some people, and why was removing yourself from an environment, why was that enough? And what did you do? Did you move out of, you know, your area? Like what did that environment change look like?
I'll go back to what you said before quickly. What it showed me is that my desire for connection and approval and essentially at the root of it, love, was stronger than death itself. My desire to connect and find love and be appreciated and respected and just belong, that was so much stronger than, you know, than death. Which I thought was just incredible. And another thing that was shown by that is how the power of association and how easily you can lose yourself to impress others. It's actually quite common for people who end up in not just drugs, but in gangs or in all of these crazy situations, is that they had nowhere to belong, and then some people made them feel like they belonged. They felt like they found their place, and then they did whatever it had to be done to remain a part of that. And especially when you're at a susceptible age like a teenager, and you can really go in any direction. And I got into drugs. I got out the same way as I got in. I got in through association, the wrong association. Not that you can call it right or wrong, but unhealthy association, which I would call personally, relatively to me, as right and wrong for my well-being. It wasn't good for my well-being, but it was interesting, and I enjoyed it at times. But I had to do the same to get out of it. Is I had to find the right association to pull me out of it, and that's. I think that's the same for any problem that you have in that category. Is like, it could be drugs, it could be mental health or anxiety, or, you know, or negative self-belief. Is you need to find a group to associate with that are more supportive of the direction that you want to go in. Which is wonderful once you get to this point. Like, I know that you're in that space, and I know I'm in that space, but I had to, certainly had to break through to that point. And get back to the question that you just asked a minute ago. Just trying to remember exactly what it was that you asked me, but it was more, I think it was more or less, why did I not reach out to a facility or anything like that. And I just didn't want to be sober. Being sober it didn't present any good or attractive opulences. It just seemed like it would be boring and painful and full of responsibility, and I just wasn't attracted to the idea of being sober at all.
So you left the environment, but what was the intent when you left the environment? Not to get sober, but what was the intent?
Sorry, can you say that again? I just lost you slightly on my headphones.
So I was curious what the intent, you left the environment, but what was the intent when you left? Was it not to become sober, or what was
survival?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Survival.
Survival.
Yeah.
So you knew you needed to change something, but the thought of going to a facility scared you because it was just seemed like a lot of responsibility and pain. So you left the environment and kind of hoped that it would evolve into becoming clean.
It was like a deep instinctive behavior where I was aware, I was like, if you don't go, you're going to die, because I had some physical health problems starting to manifest. Like my bladder was super irritated and I couldn't hold it for, like more than 5 to 10 minutes sometimes. And it was constantly like, because it irritates, obviously all it's different running chemicals through you, and ketamine specifically attacks your bladder really bad. I know people who have had to have their bladder removed from it and they now have a bag. Like, it's serious. It's super serious. Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. My headphones have gone funny again. Might just...
Technical difficulty. We're going to back on track. So we were talking about survival and your instinct. Something told you to get out of the environment. Let's dive into that.
Yeah, my desire to leave really came from a really deep instinctive place. I knew that quitting drugs was not possible for me in that moment. My mind had so much control over me, and anyone who's an addict knows that for some reason you cannot control your behavior. Your actions are out of your control in that moment. So I just left, not with the intention of getting sober, but with the intention of survival, because I was having severe problems. I couldn't, I was going to the toilet constantly. I couldn't, my bladder was super weak from ketamine, as I said. Some of my friends have had their bladders removed, which hadn't happened at the time, because obviously that was like a really new drug. People know kind of what cocaine and heroin and alcohol do long term, but nobody knew what was going on with all this, with this long term as a recreational drug. And yeah, there was even if the information was there, would it make a difference? I don't know. But yeah, I had pains in my chest, and my whole body just felt like I was 90 years old when I was 20.
Wow.
So yeah, I just had to go at whatever cost. And like I guess I was stubborn and didn't, I certainly didn't want to go to. I felt like no one could help me. I mean, like I felt like reaching out. I felt like I don't know. I just didn't feel like I would be able to connect to someone who actually wanted to try and help me.
Not even your parents?
They have no awareness of addiction. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. So it's tough.
Where did you go?
Pardon?
Where did you go?
Well, I actually went to Australia, which obviously I feel like I'm privileged to have been able to. I had friends literally had to help me with money problems and sort out my passport and my visa. And there's one friend in particular I'd be super grateful for the amount of unconditional love that he gave me in a time when I wasn't being a very lovable person. I just like, he lent me some money, and then I lost it, and then I kept trying to earn it back by selling drugs and all this real desperate behavior. Yeah. And I nearly went to prison for selling drugs as well. crash my car on drugs. Just all this absolute, like absolute chaotic time of my life. For 6 years while I was in Australia and New Zealand, I was completely anxious and a complete wreck. And I'm really lucky that pardon?
Were you doing drugs while there, or no? Were you clean?
Generally, no. More drinking occasional beers, but I was, when I first got there, I drank every day for a month, and then after that, I was just like, this is not me. When I did ketamine, somehow I felt like myself. But obviously I don't believe that that's true. But what it did is it actually removed the anxieties to the point where I didn't worry about what everybody was thinking. I didn't worry about the future. It just took away all the problems. Alcohol didn't do that for me. It made me feel really bad. I couldn't talk. I couldn't socialize at all. It made me feel like I wasn't myself at all. And I'm really grateful, because that would have led to another serious problem.
Sure.
Yeah, so I would occasionally use drugs, maybe like once every 6 months, or if but like not really, because there wasn't really ketamine about. And when I found it, it was so extortionately expensive that I would have been homeless in a week, which I did actually end up doing once when I was in Melbourne. 2 months, it was a couple of month period where I got on it, and I spent all my money, and I was basically homeless, and I had to leave. I had to get out of Melbourne because it completely dominated me. Yeah. So it wasn't for 6 years after that I actually stumbled across a yoga and meditation retreat by accident. My friend asked me. He said to me, he's like, in this situation, I'd covered all the material bases as well. I had a house. Hadn't bought a house, but I was renting a house. I was renting rooms out. I was earning money off the rooms. I had a really well-paying job. I'd been sober for 8 months. I hadn't drank alcohol for 8 months. Been completely off. And actually, in this situation, I had almost the worst anxiety that I've ever had, despite it being materially, it was the best situation.
Yeah. Okay.
But actually, my mental health was almost the worst, and it just showed me that stuff was not the answer. And one of the guys that was living in the house said to me, he's like, would you like to come to this yoga and meditation retreat with me? And I was like, yeah, I think, that's not going to be bad, is it? Like, there's just going to be nothing bad about that. It can only be okay.
Yeah.
And I went along to it. And, I was just like, over the course of that weekend of 4 days, and I was lucky it was 4 days, because the first day I was there, if it had just been 1 day, I would have been like, that's weird. Like all these, they do all these chanting and this singing and, and all these different things. And I was like, there's not a chance that I would have broke through my pride in just 1 day. But because it was 4 days, after a couple of days of it, and I stopped caring about what people think. And I was thinking in my head, like I was caring about what people would think that weren't even there. Like I was thinking about specific people I know, my old friends, and thinking, what would they think if they saw me doing this? And it's ridiculous. And after a couple of days, I just completely just chilled out, and I just went for it. And I felt just liberated, completely liberated. And these practices of Bhakti yoga, I've applied. It took a year to kind of get serious, and then for the past 12 months, it's been everything for me. It's been my entire life. It's been the thing that, because I realized that I was in a relationship with ketamine. It was like my partner. It was like my love.
Yeah.
It was my beloved, and it was like the number one thing in my life, and everything else came after that. And what it did was it caused me to be completely inconsiderate of everything else, because if that base wasn't covered, I didn't care about anything else, and it blocked out the light of everyone else. There was no consideration for anyone. I was completely selfish. And I managed to replace this relationship that I had with this substance with yoga, the meaning of yoga is union. And the idea is that it's about unifying yourself back with the whole, becoming part of the whole again, instead of just being the tiny little fragmented piece that you are. So it's like it was like the complete flipping, the whole world flipped upside down. Well, probably went back the right way up, and I'd been living the wrong way. And I think most of us live upside down. When we live for ourselves and our own desires, instead of living for what's good for everybody else.
Yeah. Wow. So it's so amazing what you're highlighting, because you're highlighting the aspects of your childhood and what you were informed about, but that at the core of anybody, they desire love and connection. And it really doesn't, like, addiction can be fueled and is often fueled by that desire. I know when I was a compulsive eater, exerciser, and bulimic, I craved acceptance and love from other people, and I would battle back and forth in my head of self-acceptance and self-worth, and I used that behavior to do that. And so you're showing us that the core and our desire and our internal just craving for acceptance and love can fuel on these unhealthy behaviors, and that even in shifting your environment, you have to be conscious enough to recognize the new habits that you may be incorporating. Because I know as women, like, shopping is an addictive behavior. I'm sure men do it too, but like, I know women are going to shopping. Like, men can get into material things like buying a boat and a house and a car, and you talked about alcohol, you talked about, relationship with food. Like, you shift your environment, but now you need awareness of, okay, you may be removing this substance, but it doesn't mean that you're necessarily removing the others, and you have to be conscious enough. And then to really invest yourself in change, you've got to kind of go within, and you found that at your yoga retreat, and that's where you really dived into that transformation. Did I summarize that pretty good, or what?
Is what, sorry?
Did I summarize that okay? Did that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and fundamentally, on at the deepest core of who we are, all we want is love, because we are a part of this bigger thing. This, the spiritual identity that we are, is part of this bigger spiritual energy. And what we actually want to do is reconnect back with it, because it's like there's this great big tree, and we're a leaf on the tree. And this is just an analogy, don't take this too literally, but it does demonstrate what's going on really well. And the leaf, we're like the leaf, and when we disconnect from the tree, we fall off the tree. What happens when a leaf falls off the tree?
It hits the ground.
It withers and dies. It dries up. That's what this cold, dark emptiness that we have within is. We've disconnected from our true self and our eternal nature, and we actually deeply, deeply desire connection and the love that comes in relationship with the whole, which is why we're always striving for perfect love or perfection in something, because it exists, but it's a part of our the nature of our spiritual identity is Satchitananda, which is knowledge, eternity, and bliss. We all want to be blissful. We all want to be happy. We all want knowledge. We all want the truth. We all want eternity. We all want to live forever. And it's because the reality is that we actually do, but all of our suffering comes from association with material. And it's actually from attachment to material that we suffer, which is fundamentally the only cause of suffering. It's like the biggest addiction going. If there's an addiction, it's being addicted to material things. I've not got my notes, but I'll try and remember. I'll try and remember off the top of my head. So when most people, if most people if you asked most people who they are, they would say, or point to you, they would go like that, wouldn't they? They would point at, this is me, this is my body, this is who I am. But actually, the every in the course of 5 years, every single atom and molecule in our entire body replaces. You get once a month, you get a complete new set of skin once a month. It's completely regenerated. You get a new stomach lining every 5 days. You get a new liver every 6 weeks. You get, over the course of 1 year, your entire skeletal system replaces itself with new atoms and molecules.
Wow.
So that if you cut off your arm, you ask yourself, I mean, you can actually do a meditation. You can actually go through and you can actually sit there and be like, am I my arm? Am I my shoulder? Am I my legs? And we know that you're not, because you cut them off, and even though you cut them off, you still exist.
Gotcha, yeah.
And if you ask that person, are you still a person? Like, everyone's treating them like they're half a person, but they're sat there all sad because they're like, I'm still a whole person. I'm still me. I'm still actually me. And you can work all the way back to the point where most people are like, are you your brain? I am my brain. But all the molecules and atoms in the brain replace every 3 days. So the brain that you have today isn't even the same as the brain that you had last week.
Wow.
If you looked at a picture of your body when you was a kid, and you said that was me, that whole body that you're looking at, the thing that you're looking at, has actually disintegrated, turned into earth, fire, water, and air. It's disintegrated, and then it's gone on to make the bodies of other living beings, and it's been recycled. So these bodies are they're just ever changing, but we're the constant that observes the body throughout. We're eternal.
What do you define that as? Is that soul? What is that?
In the Christian doctrine, it's quite common for them to say you have a soul, but in the yogic perspective, I am a soul. It is me. I am the consciousness looking out. In the world of science, they can tell you how information goes in. They can see that the information goes in through the eye, hits the retina, goes down the optic nerve, and it kind of bounces around a few parts of the brain and then goes back to the optic nerve again. But it's like, well, which bit of that's me?
Right.
That's not.
Just to get clarification, are you saying that, that intuitive knowingness that you had, that you needed to remove yourself from that environment, was that there's this inner whisper and this inner knowingness we have beyond this physical form that is kind of a guidance system, and it's almost a tool that you can use to begin to create that change that you're needing to around addiction or unhealthy behaviors?
I would argue solidly that if you do not reconnect with your true identity, you will feel completely void of anything good, of any satisfaction or fulfillment, and you will always be chasing something external, whilst feeling more frustrated and emptier as you chase. You can, I'll be happy when blank, fill in the blank, and you show me which one of them blanks does the job, because we can see that if we look at a millionaire who has the biggest house, 50 Lamborghinis, the best looking partner, they're a famous actor, and they're adored on a very shallow level probably by the entire world. From a material perspective, what don't they have? They've ticked every I'll be happy when box. There's no more boxes to tick, unless they want world domination. But this is where it goes, because there is no end.
Right.
There's no end to that.
But I think it's true that when you have I think who you are at your core, like you're speaking to, who you are at your core, when you get some of these material things, there are people, if you are a greedy, angry, upset person and you're collecting material things, it doesn't change you as a person. And you speak to doing the internal work and really diving into connecting with yourself enough to recognize am I seeking this material thing in order to find my own love and acceptance and be accepted by the external world, when at the core you have to learn to love yourself. And these added things, great, they can be an added value, but at your core you've got to love who you are. And right, am I on the right track of that?
Yeah, it's funny because it's never what but why. You can be completely poor and you can still be in the same position. It's not that being rich makes you unhappy, and it's not that being poor makes you happy, and it's certainly not that way around. Being poor is absolutely an awful place to be in.
Right.
But anyone who's in a state of poverty is looking at people with money with envy and thinking that would be the answer, because it's hard to attain that. Or even people in a very normal, I say normal, but a very, say, first world country, average situation, who have a reasonable amount of comfort. They have a house, they have a job, they can put food on the table every day and do a bit of leisure. They're still looking at all the people in that situation with all the money thinking that must be the answer. But it's the fact that every material thing is like having a zero. And it doesn't matter how many zeros you collect, everything's still zero unless you put a one in front of it. Yeah. And that one is something that you find through a spiritual reality, uncovering your actual true identity and finding things in your life that are meaningful and purposeful. And certainly acts of piety, like being a good person and doing and using what you have for the good of your greater community, the world, the environment, and making that cause the highest cause you can, will actually reconnect you with the greater whole and actually bring satisfaction and fulfillment to your heart, which is the reason why I am doing what I'm doing, sat here now with you, and have started Break the Chain, because it was my savior. I hadn't even quit drugs when I started doing Break the Chain. I simply started documenting my journey. And through the process of that and being vulnerable and exposing myself to the world as who I, more towards who I really am. Like, this is me. I've got all these vulnerabilities. I regret all this stuff. This is why I think I ended up here. And then all the other people reading my story and being like, you just told my story. I'll be like, really? And we were all acting like we're cool and, and not get, what I mean, trying to be tough boys or whatever, and not talking about our problems. And we were all suffering in the same ways, but taking it out on each other. And it was so liberating to be like, this is who I am. This is like who I actually, this is how I feel. And put that out there to the world, and the connection that came with that. It was the first time I can remember in my life where I felt like was doing the right thing. And I'd always been a self-centered person. I thought I was a nice person, but when I really think about it, is like my primary concern was myself. Really. Like, really, me, not just my needs, but my wants were more important than other people. And then once my wants were covered, then I would be nice to other people, which is quite a normal behavior. Way to be in the world. Yeah.
How would you say that you became comfortable with being vulnerable and being really authentic?
Practice.
Yeah. And that practice was you telling your story on different platforms, or what did that look like?
Well, why be vulnerable? What's it for? What's the purpose? I decided to become vulnerable for the good of others. I thought, if I can get past my own insecurities and put myself out there like fully exposed in front of the world, then maybe someone else can do that, and they won't have to feel like they have to live in the fear of judgment. It really helped. I discern heavily with who I I try to discern heavily with who I accept criticism from. Same in that same way, you know, like it comes to having good association, people who want the best for you around you, it really helps, because they'll criticize you in a way that will help you, but they won't criticize you in a way to bring you down. And then there's always going to be those people that do, but you know, people's opinions should be like water off a duck's back. Whether truth is what's important. Is it true or false? That's important. Yeah. People's opinions, if untrue, right, they're meaningless. You know, they have no purpose.
Yeah.
Beyond their own interest.
And so what, you know, you are on a much bigger stage, and you have so many people that you're connected to at this point in your journey. But I'm curious, you know, from the Reinventing You process, someone that's dealing with addiction, but they don't want to be vulnerable to the capacity that you are, and they want to just really hone in on the awareness of themselves and become more vulnerable. What do you recommend that they might do or surround themselves with to begin to make that shift in reinventing themselves around addiction?
Going to support meetings and stuff, and actually, I didn't know what was available out there. I didn't know how wonderful sobriety could be. It's not that being sober in itself is the fruit of it, really, but it's what's available when you're sober. And it's not getting sober so that you can go out and enjoy the world again. That's not really where the fruit was for me. It's like, I want to be sober so I can go and play football again, and I can go and just go on holidays and go and do all these sense pleasure enjoyments, because they never satisfied me. It was that when I got sober, it's when I actually started reaching out to the sobriety community and realizing that these people are so desperate for connection that they felt like they lost when they lost all their old social life through this and this really destructive, in these really destructive ways. But we was all just desperately craving the connection that I got at a rave, or when I was on ecstasy and everyone was telling each other how much they love them, and that openness and that and all these friends that I had through the rave scene and stuff. And then I went and I just felt like I was on my own in the world. And I realized that in the addiction community, or any recovery community, there's all these people who are just desperately wanting to connect, get together, and they have so much in common with you, because they know you can go to these things and have your own story told to you 100 times. Wow. And you can be feeling like, oh, it's just me that I've been through this. You feel like it's only me, no one gets it. But then you go to a meeting and you just like, people tell you their story, and it's like, oh my God, that's heavy. Wow. That's way worse than my story. Like, and there's just sort of, but like, and then one of the, you know, like the 12 steps, that step 12 is you have to go on to help another addict. But you can take the word addict out and you can replace that with anything. Go on to help another person in whatever area of life it is. And that's kind of like, if you don't complete step 12, you will relapse. That's fact. You will relapse if you don't, because you're not getting the connection. So everyone that's in that world becomes just like, it's like, be a really, really good person or die. And that's the choice that you get. And that's kind of what's really cool about ex-addicts, is like and I know people that were ex-armed robbers who like go to church, who are just like really nice, who live for like helping grandmas across the road, you know, like that's what their life went from, guns to helping grandmas. Yeah. And it's just like, you don't get a choice after you've been an addict. And I think that, you know, that's part of the disease in the first place, is you was only thinking about yourself. If you don't think about others, you'll never be free from it.
Wow. What a beautiful message. I love that as a conclusion to just, you know, the journey of healing from addiction and really reinventing your life. And I can't thank you enough, the awareness that you've brought of just the process and the journey and what it looks like. And, you know, it seems from a step-by-step process, it's first being an awareness of this change needs to happen, and you know, who you're associating with and the environment that you're exposing yourself to needs to shift. And that can look like moving, that can look like support groups, that can look like yeah, that's the two I have listed, and feel free to.
I'll just make a point, because I've, you know, it's so important in my life. It has been my savior. Through spiritual practice, I've found the same things that are taught in 12-step programs. 12-step programs. Basically, every 12-step program is based upon the same things at the core of it, and spiritual teaching is it. And in the world of spirituality, I would just err a little bit of caution, because there's a lot of people who are full of shit. So just be aware of, when you're learning from people. There's three things that I've been taught to always consider when you're going to learn from someone. Is what's their character? You know, who are they? What are they all about? What's their qualification? Are they qualified to teach you? If they're a guru, do they have a guru, or are they just saying they're a guru but they didn't need a guru? Because that's bullshit. Every teacher has to have been a student.
Right.
You need it's part of the humility. It's part of the process. What's the qualification? Character. Something else. I can't remember. I'll put it, and we'll put it in the notes, because it's really important when you're going to learn from somebody to know that you can trust them, and you should have a sense that you can trust that person. Yeah. And even if you go to India, and it's like looking in India for gurus and stuff, there's plenty of gurus. Everyone's gagging to be a guru, but to find a real one, they ain't going to want to sit on that. Real guru don't want to sit on a big seat.
Yeah,
they've always a real, and I don't, and you know, gurus, like spiritual masters, is a very special and unusual thing. But I think that learning from people, and I would recommend trying to find people who have a great deal of humility. They're not desiring respect. They're incredibly tolerant and patient. They don't get angry, and they have good control of their emotions. And anybody like that, I would seek to be around people like that, and to learn from, because that is a sign of spiritual advancement. And everybody has we all have a degree of, our consciousness is all different to a different degree, and people are either closer towards the light or closer towards the darkness. And generally, you know, anywhere where things are like heavily loads of intoxication, loads of really noisy, you know, and I think that, you know, just pulling away from those and aiming towards the slightly more peaceful, healthier life. And I think that in terms of reinventing myself, I don't necessarily see it like that, them in them words, but it can mean the same thing. So things mean different things to different people. But there was a decision that I had to make in my life where it's like, am I going to start being a caretaker rather than a destroyer? I was destroying the environment, relationships, my body, everything around me, and I had to choose to be because something that I got taught by our spiritual master is like, our relationship with the material things should be, including our body and other people and the environment, and our finances and everything, is that we should act as though we are a caretaker. We should be here to take care of everything around us. And I just thought that was just such a beautiful, it was thing to realize and understand, is like, because that balances everything. That balances your own health. that balances your mind, because we should be taking care of these things. It's not like some people take that whole love yourself thing and they're like, and they can, you can really go overboard with it, being like, and they just make it all about sense enjoyment and it's self-focused, like, and they're just buying themselves things and all, like that's some kind of, like that's going to do them some good, but that's actually not, because they're not taking care of their finances. And this whole is like, are you taking care of everything in this balanced way? And when you take care of things, it really sorts things out.
Yeah, that's amazing. So it balance, and it just seems like looking beyond yourself and making a difference in the world and focusing less on you and more on how you can give is a piece to creating that balance that you're speaking to.
Balance doesn't come, it's not like you're like balancing all these things, and like if you put all this effort into, like, you're just like, whoa, and it's just like, whoa, and it's like, oh, that's gone out of balance, and like, oh, my diet, and I ate a cookie today, and oh no, like, oh no, you can't do that. And then all of a sudden you like look behind you and it's like, oh God, and you get hit by a bus because you can't do all this stuff.
Yeah.
How many things are there to balance?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I mean, but you can waste all of your energy balancing things and miss the point of life, because that's going to completely blind you to what's going on in the external and out there in the world and other people. And I think you summarized it really well, is aim to have a meaningful life that's good for the greatest cause that you can, but also in the humble ways, because don't get affected by pride and think you need to do something great, but just aim to do good in the world and to take care of everything in a loving way, and that balances everything around you. And it is the opportunity to love is a relationship with other things, people, other beings. And through this caretaking and this desire to help, you will connect with these people. And it's just the most wonderful process. And there's an opportunity to feel whole, to feel complete, to feel satisfied, to feel joy and bliss. And I wouldn't have thought that was possible for me, because I was just not looking in the right places before.
Yeah. What an amazing story of reinventing you, and just that you are making such an impact. And I just want to speak to this, because talk about someone who is investing his life into creating and giving back and offering a space for change. Because I mean, James, between your Facebook group, you do the support groups on live chat, you do, gosh, your Instagram, you have your website, you have your apparel, and that goes back to the organization to give back. Like, there's so many layers that you're trying to expand and serve with this message around educating people about mental health and addiction. And I mean, I hope you're proud of what you're doing, because you're doing great things, and you are exactly a model of what you're speaking to. Not only have you reinvented yourself and healed yourself, but you're making an impact, and you're really giving back to the world. And thank you. That's amazing.
You're welcome. I like that other people say that I should be proud of myself, but I don't be proud of myself, because it doesn't lead in a good direction. Humility is a far better platform to operate from.
Well, stay humble, James.
It's not easy for me. It's these things that it's not easy to stay there, but thank you very much for the compliment.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. This was amazing. And I know that you have provided some really great tools and education to our audience on reinventing themselves in life. And I can't thank you enough.
You're welcome. I'll just, if anyone wants to find us.
I apologize. Yes, please. Yes.
At Break the Chain World Mission on Instagram. And if you go from Instagram, in our bio, there is a link there to everything, to our Facebook page, to YouTube, podcast, shop, and hopefully website if we ever get it finally finished, because it's been a mammoth task. But yeah, thank you ever so much.
Yeah, thank you, James. I appreciate it. And I'll make sure to put all the links and everything in the bio section. So,
Awesome. Thank you. Have a great day. Cheers.
bye-bye.